Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, evaluation subcommittee meeting. You want to do roll call?
Mr. Bailey? Mr. Dias?
Here.
Ms. Pereira?
Here. Salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Do we have any citizens input?
We do not.
Okay. So discussion 3.1, discussion to revise the timeline. So as we know, we've just recently appointed the superintendent, and the timeline that we have followed in the past, or that has been followed in the past, has to be revised in order to keep us sort of on schedule. So I did something which I think was preliminary, so I want to know your thoughts. But today, obviously being the 5th, if we can sit here and sort of establish the process we're going to use, so that on the 18th, our next meeting is the 18th, correct, of November. So our next meeting on the 18th, we present that to the full committee, any changes, what have you, and then we have that process voted on by the full committee, so the superintendent knows the evaluation that we're going to be using. By our next meeting, December 9th, I would expect that the superintendent present her self-evaluation to us, which we need before we can evaluate. So we would get that at the December meeting, and then I would ask that the committee by December 30th, so that gives you 3 weeks, for the committee to get those evaluations to me, and then that gives me 2 weeks to organize them together and present them back to the full committee on January 13th. So I think that's as quick as we can go, but what are your thoughts?
On specifically the timeline,
Yeah.
That sounds, at least to me, that sounds very well. I will say, I do have a question. So this is us until January, so we're not going to discuss the timeline for the next evaluation.
So then it would start again. It would go back, correct, to what it initially should be.
Correct.
So right now we're kind of going rogue, I guess, because we're only evaluating somebody who was hired, in July. I mean,
Right.
So right now it's only been like 3 full months and change, 3 and change months.
Right.
So by the time we do this, so we would then assume go back to the timeline of she would have to establish goals in August, right? We would go back next year. I'm talking about next year.
Correct.
But I would need to, at some point in this, I would have to set my goals for this cycle.
Correct.
So that next November, I could be evaluated.
Correct.
On those goals.
But it's
Correct.
interesting because
Correct.
the goals are supposed to be set in August. It's gonna be
Right.
off for 3 years in a row.
If I may add, I think, and it's all in one, so
Yeah.
this is sort of a
Yeah.
question, but
Sure.
in relevance to the timeline, I don't believe we should be evaluating any goals that you may have, because it's just too soon. Even by the time we get to January, it'll still be like 6 months.
Okay.
I believe that you should be submitting your goals to the full committee for the next evaluation very soon, and I think that should be within the timeline.
Yeah.
But this shortened evaluation, I don't believe we should be evaluating those goals. I don't know if you agree.
That would be, I don't disagree, but there's a part of the evaluation which directly talks to superintendent's performance goals. We could eliminate that complete section.
Which I'm not opposed to.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
At least for this shortened.
But would you agree that the goals should still be presented by December? Or are you saying because we're not using her self-evaluation, her goal setting for this evaluation, that we don't need to do it, have them in by December? Or do you think that December timeline is still good in terms of just having them in for the following?
Yeah, so the goal, what you have here for setting the goals is for the next cycle. No, I think even sooner. I think even by the November meeting, because I think we should have had this by now.
The only reason I put December is because generally, and I don't have much more experience in this than you, don't get me wrong, but from what I understood, or took my, one takeaway I had last time, was that while they're doing their self-evaluation, they're also reflecting on the evaluation tool we're using and what we're looking for. But I guess she has it if that hasn't changed, if we're talking about November.
Right, as superintendent,
I don't know though if we can, if we're gonna vote on the, if we're gonna be voting on the timeline, I don't think we can just do that, so we would have to submit that to the next meeting. So I think at the earliest, do you know what I mean?
December would be.
So I think December would be
Yeah.
the next meeting, right? So that would be okay, I think. So give her one meeting, which I think is sufficient amount of time. Because right now we're already at the
Are
beginning
you
of
talking
November.
about an eval meeting, evaluation, or
No,
regular
I'm talking
school?
about a regular
Oh,
school
okay.
committee meeting. So if she presents her goals by our regular school committee meeting, which would be December 9th, I think that's fair. It gives her time, and it also gives the committee time to approve what we're suggesting.
No, I don't.
Do you know what I
disagree.
mean?
I agree with you.
Okay, so we don't, do we have to vote on sending this timeline over?
Can
Yes.
I just ask a question? I'm
Sure,
sorry, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So you're requesting that the superintendent present her goals to the school committee for the next cycle
Correct.
in December?
Because what Colin is saying, which I agree with, if she's setting goals, does she really have time to accomplish any of the goals she's setting? Really, we want to hear what she's going to do throughout the year, that we then are going to evaluate her next year and
yeah.
say, hey, these were the goals you set at the beginning of the year. We watched you and your performance all year, and now we're going to evaluate that. So I understand what he's coming from.
Yep.
What we're going to evaluate her on now, I guess, is what we're going to discuss next.
Would you like me to read this out into a form of motion, or what we're?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you read my
Sure.
jargon? It's like half script. Yeah, I don't know. Can you?
Okay, let me see here.
I used to be a nurse. I write in half words. Say. And like a doctor.
So I'll make a motion, and I'll speak slowly, that we refer an abbreviated timeline from November until January. That,
November to January?
yes,
Okay.
that on 11/18, you approve the timeline and the process. December 9th, the superintendent presents a self-evaluation. By December 20th, the evaluations are due by the school committee. And by January 13th of 2025, that the evaluations are presented to the full committee. And that by December 9th, the superintendent also provides their goals for the district for the next cycle. That the same?
Yeah. Nope. Perfect. So I guess second. Aye.
Do you want me to do a roll call?
Well, sure.
Sure.
Mr. Dice?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Okay, so the next part, 3.2. So, I was thinking that what we would do is kind of go through here. So at first we thought, we can't use this whole thing because we're not using the whole thing. But to completely revamp a form that's already been, is already being used and approved, I don't think is necessarily necessary. I think that it's legally fine if we just put not applicable in the sections we're not gonna use.
Sure.
So I think that now we just kind of need to look through and say, okay, what are we not gonna use? This first section is just a grading sheet.
Right, I don't believe we need, if you wanna go step by step.
Yeah. You don't think we need this page here,
What's
which
this?
we just talked about, that's the goal setting one?
Right, no, I do not.
Okay.
And where do you wanna start from? I'm sorry.
Superintendent, how about the first kind of like piece is the superintendent performance rating standard 1 instructional leadership? I think it's page 5 or 7.
Is it page 2?
5 of 7?
Oh, 5 of 7, sorry.
I have eight pages on mine.
Oh, okay.
7,
Weird.
oh, I'm trying, okay.
Nope, one more. That one.
Right. Yeah.
So I had already had a thought of like eliminating those, I don't know what you think. But the ones that,
E through F?
yeah, the ones that had anything to do with data, because we really can't, we haven't had time to evaluate her on any data per se. She hasn't given, like you said, she hasn't given us goals, she hasn't, you know, been working long enough, I think, for us to say if she's made any headway as far as, you know, data.
I'm not opposed to referring that to the full committee to discuss. Superintendent, do you have any thoughts?
In terms of anything around standard 1, I
Or
think that
eliminating the 3?
Eliminating
Bottom
D,
three.
E, and F.
D, E, and F. I think that there are elements. It's hard because much of it wouldn't be thorough, right? So in terms of evaluation, we are starting up the evaluation process, but we wouldn't have data that speaks to, you know, the rate at which people are being evaluated, what percent of teachers and administrators were. That would be something I think that, you know, needs an annual cycle. The data-informed decision-making, I think some of that piece is tricky because a lot of the district level planning in which I engaged was in my previous position in preparation for this year, coming out of the end of last year.
Mhm.
So I think that piece of it gets a little bit tricky because it was in my former
Correct.
position. And so part F, the student learning piece, demonstrates expected impact on student learning based on multiple measures of. I would agree then that D, E, and F I think are pieces that we could that would require really a full year.
I'll make a motion that we, if we're gonna go through this line by line, I make a motion that we strike, refer to the full committee, standard 1 with section D, E, and F stricken.
Okay, second.
Colin, I'm sorry, you said to refer
Make a motion.
Yes, to refer,
standard 1.
standard 1 instructional leadership to the full committee with section D, E, and F stricken.
Okay. Mr. Bailey? Mr. Dias?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes. The other one was management and operations. I thought B and E should be stricken. But take a look. I feel like the others, there's something that we can evaluate on, but those I think are more difficult. Definitely E.
Develops a budget that supports. And if I can ask, I don't know if anyone necessarily has the answer to the question, but when it says, is this strictly to developing a budget or approving different line items throughout the year, either expenditures, bills, etc.?
Are you talking about the E?
Yes.
I look at it as the budget, because it starts with develops a budget that supports district vision. Automatically, she hasn't, really completely done that. And then it says, districts of vision, allocates and manages expenditures consistent with districts. Again, we're looking at 3 months of expenditures. I don't know. I just don't feel like, I don't feel like that one, I feel she hasn't done the budget yet.
Right, I agree.
So-
I do agree with you on
And
the
even
budget.
the money she spent so far, we don't know yet the outcome of that. You know, if there I'm not saying money you've spent, but I'm saying if there have been any changes of money allocated. Most of those things we don't have an outcome for yet. So,
As some committee members, I do agree with you on the
and
budget
then the only
part.
reason I did the human resource one, because again, she just started, I don't think we can really, I don't think she has significantly developed or implemented any kind of like cohesive approach to recruiting, nor do I expect her to have done anything that we would be able to evaluate in 3 months. I'm looking at it as of now, right? 'Cause it's only been about 4 months, right, as of now.
To
Less than
July,
4.
August, September,
Yeah.
October.
It's like 4 months.
It-
So I look at that time frame. Even though we're gonna be submitting this a few months from now, I'm looking at, my perspective is now, I wouldn't know what to evaluate in sections B and E, because I don't feel like I have enough.
Quick
That's
question
what I
going
thought.
back to the timeline, so if say
Mhm.
this gets approved, and we send something and then the district, I mean, the committee approves the timeline, when would we receive this document as a school committee?
For you to can fill out,
Yes, what was the date we just,
you could receive it whenever you wanted, really.
as soon as it's
Well, the committee would
approved?
get.
As soon as we decide,
So
yeah.
once it's decided here, the committee would get a draft, so-called, of the tool
I would say we
at
would
the
get it,
November 18th meeting.
yeah, and I would
And
say we
then
get a
from
draft of
there-
this with the not app or whatever we agreed on.
Correct, that
Correct.
would be what would be presented at the November 18th meetings, because the full committee would need to approve the tool. And then at the December 9th, from the timeline that is being referred, the superintendent at that point then presents her self-eval to the committee.
Mainly for the purpose of, yeah.
Yep, so that way the committee knows what they're gonna be evaluating her on.
So basically,
And then
yeah.
what you stated on your timeline, you would want to have all evals from the school committee by 12:30.
I did say 12, he said 12:20, I think, in the thing. And I thought, ooh,
Yes.
that might be a better idea, because honestly, they're gonna get it done before Christmas probably.
Okay.
It's my thought process, but this
And-
way it gives
and then you
leeway
would
too,
present
if
the
somebody for some reason can't get it done by the 20th, life
Did I say
happens.
the 20th? Oh,
You did, but that's okay, because when you said it, I went, oh, I like it better. So I was good with it. But, because honestly, sometimes life happens, so if somebody does have to extend it, then it's okay, it still gives me time.
Yep.
And then this way,
And
the
then
goal is, hey, get it
113.
before the holidays anyway.
Yeah,
you know?
and then 113, you would be
I'm presenting it, right. So I would say, Colin, that if we say, okay, we agree on this here, we agree on eliminating ABC, whatever, and Deb goes and makes, again, something that we can have a printout with those sections not applicable, at that meeting, we can present that to the full committee. If the full committee agrees with all the changes, then they can take that home with you, stop filling it out. If they don't agree and we need to make amendments, then they would have to be a change to it. Cause I would like to see whatever we decide that we're putting not applicable, I would like it in here, printed, like, not applicable, not allowing
Yes.
people to fill it out, because if
Yep.
they are writing something, then I need to look at that, right? So I just want it to, make sure whatever we agreed on as a full committee is on the forms we get.
Correct, and that would be on the 18th.
Right.
We would present that to the
And
committee.
hopefully if they like it the way it is, then great, if not, there may have to be some changes, cause there could be something amended for sure, right?
Right, I agree with you on B, and
Yeah.
honestly, I think for the next cycle as well, I just don't like the way B's worded either, because, well, I like the fact that I mentioned recruitment, hiring, induction. I think there's a little bit more to human resources and, managing, situations that come about, which I believe,
That's in other sections though, like, there's other sections that deal with like, are you talking about issues with like employee issues and
Sure.
things like that? There's other sections that specifically address that.
okay.
So this is basically just more, more development of staff and the management of the human resource department. Is she pushing them to, come up with creative recruiting tools? Are they, doing the things they need to do? There is another section, I believe actually it might be in the next thing.
Sure, and we can get to that.
Yeah.
In
But I see
terms
what you
of in terms of E, if maybe we can strike a sentence out, because I believe even by the time we get to December, and I even believe now with the allocation and managing of expenditures, it's consistent with district and school
Okay.
level goals. I think we've had a lot of allocations that come down the
Can
light.
you trust me, Pen?
Sure.
Thank you. Alright, so strike out develops a full budget right? Obviously that
Develops a
part.
full budget that
Develops a
supports the
budget that
district's
supports
vision, mission,
missions
and goals.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
then we can say allocates and manages expenditures consistent with district school goals. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll make a motion that we strike section B out of standard 2 and strike out one sentence out of section E that states develops a budget that supports the district's vision, mission, and goals.
second.
Mr. Bailey? Mr. Dias?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes. This one is family and community engagement. I mean, I kinda looked at it and the only thing I thought that could be maybe taken out would be C. And only because it states, engages in regular, two-way culture, and I don't know how much time she's had to actually do that. But the rest of them are pretty, I think, general, and I think we could definitely evaluate her on most of these things. What are your thoughts?
Family.
Do you
Yeah,
have any
no,
thoughts, Superintendent?
I agree with you.
Do you think strike C or just leave it, or?
I actually think we could leave C
Yeah,
for,
'cause they're all kind of,
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
okay.
I see where you're coming from though with the irregular.
Yeah.
way. Okay.
Okay.
Move on.
Alright, and the next one, this is the professional culture one, so this is the one column that I think there's somewhere in here, like managing conflict, not between employees, district, school, community. Let's see. Okay, the only one I looked that I thought maybe could be stricken would be D. And it's because it says, it talks about using data and research and, again, things we don't really have yet this time around. And sort of using that data and research to develop strategies.
No,
Which obviously is the goal of what she's gonna do, but I don't know that that's something we could evaluate her on right now. So that was the only one I saw there that I thought could be taken out. Thoughts?
Superintendent, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where that, I think that we could strike that. I think that could make sense.
Just one question, and I'll vote in favor of striking it. I don't need it tonight, but if if maybe just from my edification of like when we start receiving different data from different curriculums or whatnot, if the committee could receive a date on that, like when we should be receiving those, that would be
Data on curriculum?
anything that would be relevant to that section.
Okay.
I mean, use student data. I mean, what do you believe this would usually be used for? This section.
So as as I've read through these before, and we're looking at them again tonight, there's an element of me immediately saying like, kind of, what's the evidence of that? Like,
Right.
what's the artifact? What's the thing? And so, for that, I think that it's about kind of that a public messaging really around. It will show up in the way we support people to do goal setting at the beginning of school years around their student learning and professional practice goals and the communication around that. Ways in which I'm working with principals right now. So I have people that I evaluate, and I'm having goals meetings with people right now so that they can set their goals, personal and professional and student learning goals for the coming year. And so I think that I think it shows up there in documentation of those discussions and communication around that. So there, I guess it's the depth of it, right? Continuous learning, like that to me seems when you're developing and nurturing a culture, it's like, what does that look like in over the course of 4 months? I could give you some artifacts that would show the kinds of discussions and goals revisions discussions I'm having with people, but is that really solid and really impactful evidence that I'm developing and nurturing a culture. I don't know.
So is your opinion this should be modified or just struck
I feel like
for this time around?
I think we could actually. I do think it's one that we could probably strike. I will say that personally, I want to be able to offer very solid evidence that people could look at and say that could show, like, you know, a kind of a body of work, which I wouldn't have had over the last 4 months.
Right.
And so I think that's what makes, I mean, so many of these difficult. I feel like I could give you a piece of evidence to say, yes, I do this. But does it mean I do it, or does it mean there's evidence that I've done it one time, or, you know, whatever it is. So I just think in general we have to be, I don't know, careful about what the expectations are in the first 4 months. So
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to strike section D out of standard 4.
You know, I think I think that the committee has had conversations, and I feel confident that everybody's well aware that we're evaluating 4 months or 5 months, and that obviously is going to change the approach a little bit. And I think everybody understands that. So did you make the motion?
I did.
Second, sorry, second.
Mr. Bailey? Mr. Dias?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes. So that's all of them. So Deb, would you be able to give us, everybody a copy of this with just not applicable or whatever?
On those
this part's
sections.
stricken, yeah.
Yep,
And remove
so
that
this first part here,
And then,
none of that's
Right.
changing.
well, this first page is sort of like where you put all the information at the end, so that's not gonna change. That's like where calculation.
I think there's a few, I don't know if you want to, under the end of cycle, I don't know if we already did this, if we did, strike out for the end of cycle some cumulative evaluation report. Since this is the first step is specifically about goals, maybe I'll make a motion to strike out step 1.
Step 1, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So strike out step 1 of the cumulative evaluation report. And then we keep step 2 and step 3, because that's just.
Right, and I'll even make a motion, and add to that motion, to include striking out the superintendent's performance goals out of this section.
Which one is that, step 3? Or 4?
Not the next page.
Step 2.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna strike this one all out.
Step
Yeah, we
1
already-
and
yep.
2.
No, so, no.
Step 1.
So end of cycle summit, evaluation report, just step 1,
Okay.
okay? Then when you go down, the superintendent's performance goals, we're gonna eliminate that whole page, because that's where she's listing her goals. I'm gonna give you this, Deb, at the end of this. We're gonna eliminate this whole page,
Oh,
which
right
is
here.
just
Yeah,
the superintendent
yeah.
performance goals.
So that's
Because that's all related to her goals, we're gonna get rid of the whole page. And then again, and then everything else we went through and voted on to. Should we do like one last, you have here discussion vote to approve the tool. Should we do one last vote to approve this? In completion of what we're presenting with the timeline? Well, the timeline was actually approved, so. I
It was
make a
referred,
motion, yeah, make a motion to refer.
Can I
Do we-
just
Oh,
get a
yeah,
roll
go
call on
ahead,
that?
sorry,
Mr. Bailey, Mr. Dias,
Yes.
Ms. Pereira.
yeah.
If I can just ask one more quick
Yeah,
question
of course.
on 3-3.
Yeah.
Just how it's been done in the past. Usually when a superintendent comes on, do they usually their goals? Do they usually submit that to the committee, or is it usually? Does that usually have to go through eval? Because I'm just trying to think. Do you even need this rubric to be approved for yourself to submit goals to the committee?
It's a goal-setting meeting that the superintendent has with the school committee, because it's the superintendent's goals along with the school committee goals. So she presents
Right.
those goals to the school committee. It's actually a meeting prior to our actual meeting.
And does that
And
even have
then-
anything to do with evaluation?
Those, once they're approved, she presents them at this goal setting meeting. And then she receives feedback from the committee on those goals. This is what has happened in the past. She applies those feedback to her goals, and then the following month, she then brings it's an agenda item on the agenda for approval of the school committee. So once the school committee approves it, those are now her goals for that cycle for her to be evaluated on for that following year.
Right, thank you for that. I guess my question was, if you already have goals drafted, and if you wanted to submit it sooner to the committee, maybe at our November meeting, what is that?
I think I could probably put something together for November.
Okay, because
Does that mean we would have to meet for 30
Prior.
minutes prior?
We're not gonna, there's no way we're gonna be able to do that.
No.
Meeting, right? I don't think.
I mean, one thing I could do, I mean, whatever, I can offer something in advance of the, yeah, it's a little tricky, because December 9th is going to be
It's
a
literally 2 weeks later.
self-assessment.
Right,
Because
that's
our
what I mean,
meeting
yeah, I mean,
in
it's
November
late.
is later, it's pushed back, it's
Right.
literally like 2 or 3 weeks later.
Yeah,
So from the timeline that the chair and Ms. Dye is talking about, it looks as though that goal setting meeting could be set for December.
right. Well, if we're stating in what we sent to the full committee, the timeline we said at the December 9th meeting, she'd be presenting it to the, which means we would have already had that meeting prior with her, correct?
No, I'm taking it as, that goal setting meeting would be the goals that she's putting in place for her next cycle.
Right,
What she's gonna be presenting to the committee in, this is how I'm taking it, and I could be wrong.
okay.
But what she's gonna be presenting to the committee in December is her eval, is her
like a
self-evaluation.
self-assessment.
Yes, based on what it is that you've decided here on this
Got you,
tool.
got you.
Correct?
That is.
I mean, am I wrong with
Yeah,
assuming
you know what I
that?
think the tricky part is usually when there's a full annual
Yeah.
evaluation, right? So technically what would usually happen is like I'd go through a full cycle, I'd get evaluated. There'd be feedback in that evaluation. I would then use
Right.
that to craft, or at least it would influence in some way, my goals for the following year. The tricky part is I will be evaluated in January after I have already submitted goals in December. It's not a perfect process.
Yeah, and if I could just ask a question, comment, so like with the goals that we're not that's why we're not going to evaluate your goals this time around, but I understand where you're coming from, so it might influence, but usually, I guess, like, but this is your first time being evaluated as a superintendent, you're new to the position. When does usually a superintendent submit their goals, like their original goals to the committee? Is it usually, I heard it was right away.
This technically, right, there would have been this kind of meeting back in August to set some kind of goals for the year, but that didn't happen. And then it got, so I would have been set, if I was just brand new, we would have sat down without, I don't know. I don't know. I know that people are trying to stick to a timeline, which I completely respect, because in the past, we've had superintendents submitting their goals at the same, it's December.
If I could interject,
Even though they were here the year before, we were still doing goal setting in December.
real quickly,
Correct.
when you said this meeting, are you referring to eval or a full committee? You're talking about full committee. They only meet in August usually, or are we talking
But
about?
it hasn't
eval?
happened.
Right.
I would
Yeah,
say that.
that goal
I
setting
think-
meeting, it's either August or September.
Right, it's supposed to, but in my experience, having attended Mrs. Ponce's, they have been happening
later.
later.
Mhm.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the evaluation, it does make sense for an evaluation to happen late October, November, because that's when we have all of the district assessment data, all of that accountability data comes in the fall. And the evaluation very much can be dependent on that because you set goals around that accountability data. So then now you've gotten your data, you're getting your feedback from school committee, and now you set new goals for the following year.
Okay.
But the way the timeline is set by this committee, it says like August, September, right? Technically is when August, September,
correct.
school committee and superintendent establish goals.
Yes.
So we have this established policy around the evaluation cycle, which has not been in practice for a while.
Why?
Correct, because the last time that, and you're correct, Superintendent, the last time that was actually followed with that timeline was with Matt Malone.
Why
Because
haven't we why does the goals meeting have to be separate from the normal school committee meeting? It's just the way it's been done. I just don't see the issue of having
don't know.
it as an agenda item during
Yeah.
a normal meeting.
I don't either, I don't know if it's just the way it's been done.
I think it was a little bit, more
Why don't you ask,
informal.
okay, more informal.
It was kind of like a just
Mhm.
sit,
Right.
the attendance was taken, it was also recorded and so
Okay.
forth, because it is a meeting.
Yeah,
But I think it's a little bit more informal, with regards to the superintendent, presenting her goals,
Mhm.
and then the school committee, providing feedback on them,
Yeah.
possibly adding to it, or, giving her, feedback in regards to what it is that they were looking for, or what they're not looking for, and so forth. And then with that feedback being taken, she would make the adjustments, and then that would be brought to the committee the following month for approval of the school committee, because the school committee essentially needs to approve those goals.
right,
Then now they're in place, and then she has those goals that she'll be moving forward with.
alright, do you have anything else for me?
Did not know. Did you want to make a motion to approve?
Is the committee looking for, I'm sorry, I just wanna make sure that, cause I know it's a modified, but I also don't want, when we're at the full committee, I don't want somebody coming with a question. I wanna make sure that all our T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
I'm sure there'll be questions.
Is the committee looking for the superintendent to provide, evidence with any of these that they're going to be evaluating her on?
I mean,
Because normally when it's a full cycle,
Yeah.
normally the superintendent has a binder with artifacts and evidence.
Yeah.
And that is
I
available
mean,
to any of the school
sure.
committee members.
Yeah.
But with this being modified, and the committee only evaluating the superintendent on only 4 or 5 months of her being in this position, and the tool being modified to only what's applicable, what is the committee looking for as evidence? Or is the committee just looking for her to do her self-assessment based on those?
I mean, I can speak for myself, but I would say that I expect 7 months of a self-evaluation. 7 months, 4 months, 5 months, as long as you've been in the job. I think the self-evaluation is helpful for us to see where, someone sees their strengths or their weaknesses, or where they're going, or promoting things they've done that maybe we haven't seen or acknowledged. That's why I think it's important that you sort of, say, hey, this is what I've been doing the last 5 months. These are the things I'm looking, these are the things I'm working toward. Again, not necessarily establishing goals that we're gonna be, evaluating you on each goal, but I think a self-evaluation is an important part of it. It's an important tool. So I think that's what I'd be looking for.
And just
Not
adding-
necessarily evidence.
Right.
Okay.
If there's evidence, sure, that's what you would present it, but I think we can only expect so much. We don't have
Okay.
data, we don't have, what evidence are we gonna have?
Okay.
So I wouldn't imagine, that wouldn't be something I would expect at this point we would have.
Okay.
I mean, no, there is evidence to some of the questions on here that you have that you started, but I agree with Ms. Pereira, there's going to be this, so much of a sample size we're going to be looking at, but if, I mean, I think it's more looking at this, disagreeing with Ms. Pereira's point, but adding my own opinion why this is good that we're having this early. If there's anything we would, as committee members, like to add as a way of helping you, or things that we've noticed, to leave comments as well, I think it'll be helpful for you to set your goals.
No,
going
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that, so I will say, and I appreciate that question that you asked in terms of the expectations. I think it's good to hear it out loud. I mean, as part of my self-assessment, that self-eval, my intention is to provide evidence where I can, right? So it's providing a narrative where I'm assessing myself against standards, usually be assessing myself and my practice against goals as well, but against the standards. And it is a very good time to just do some reflection and really think through these as expectations. These are indicators of proficiency here. So to be able to think through those and say like, oh, I need to focus a little bit more in this area, because even though I'm doing the thing, where is the evidence that I am doing X, Y, and Z? So I feel comfortable with that, and I feel like I will have more evidence for some than others, and then that will help me set some goals.
If maybe, if, I just, and I hate to go back, but just an idea, and I think you would be supportive of this, because since it is 4 months, so for a lot of these we have unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, exemplary. Maybe we add a 5th column that says not enough data.
But I think those should be the not applicable stuff. Or I get what you're saying. You're saying if an individual feels like they feel like I don't have enough data to make an evaluation with
And
I'm fine with that.
And the superintendent.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
But so
Just where page are you looking at, Colin?
He's
Sure.
talking about everyone.
Oh, okay.
all the all the standards.
Standard 1, 2, and 3.
One,
You
two,
know,
Where it
you
says
have the-
unsatisfactory,
3.
needs improvement, proficient,
and 4.
and exemplary?
And
Is
it's
that-
right, where it says
Yes.
those,
Yeah.
he's saying if we could add a section that's, what's the word you? it's the
Yeah,
word
not
you-
or not applicable, but at least I think it should be committee member discretion if it's they believe it's not
Not
applicable.
enough information
Or
on
there's not
it, you
enough
know.
information, or the superintendent wants to believe there's not enough information to give enough evidence to back some of these, and then we can definitely debate it as a committee, but at least giving you that option. So I'll make a motion that we include in standards 1 through 4 a 5th section, answer section that says not applicable / not enough data.
Second.
Mr. Bailey? Mr. Dias?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes. We're all set. Any
I'll
new
make
business?
a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Mr. Bailey? Mr. Dias?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes.